What's up, guys? This is a different style of video than usual, and I did my first interview for the YouTube channel, so I hope you guys enjoy. And if you do, as usual, comment at the end if it's something you want to see more of in the future. Just let me know either way. Connor works for Bleacher Report and has a podcast on Patreon called Badlands, revolving around the New York Jets, and I hope you guys enjoy. Please like and subscribe, as it helps a ton, and it would be very much appreciated. This is the first face reveal for a full interview, so if anyone was ever wondering the face behind football analysis, this is it. And without further introduction, now the interview talking about the NFL draft with Connor Rogers. Okay, we now welcome on a very special guest, the first ever, the inaugural interview for the Football Analysis YouTube channel. It is Connor Rogers of Bleacher Report and host of Badlands on Patreon. So Connor, first off, thanks for coming onto the channel. We appreciate the time and interview, and we're just going to dive right into the 2021 draft. So we're going to start with Trevor Lawrence. With first and foremost, that's how the 21 draft starts. Now, the question I'm going to ask is, isn't there any chance he ends up outside of Jacksonville, because everyone at the grandma knows that's where he's going, but rather a question you may not have been asked yet, and that is, and this is obviously projecting, but do you think Trevor will be the most slam dunk number one pick in your lifetime as a reporter, as an analyst?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think he's one of the easier guys to put at number one, right? Not just because we have players that are top overall of each class not go number one each year. I think an example for me is I had Quentin Nelson as the top player of that class, and a lot of people had Saquon or whatever it may be. You never know, and that was the year that obviously Baker Mayfield went number one. So there's a lot of variables. This year, it's like the consensus. It's rare to find someone that doesn't think Trevor is not the top quarterback, but also not the best overall player. I think it's been, kind of set in stone for a while. There was always, things change, right? There was always hype around him as a recruit, him and Justin Fields as 1A and 1B. Trevor comes in, he's phenomenal as a freshman, and obviously was really, really great as a sophomore and didn't really do anything this year that takes away that stock. So I think when you look at it, when you summarize, or ask the question like that, I think he's the easiest guy I've had in a while, where it's, a lot of the times somebody will come into as the number one player from the summer, and by the end of the season, somebody overtakes them, and they might not fall out of the first round. They might fall one spot, maybe two spots. But it's pretty rare. I'm trying to think. I think the most obvious example or most recent would be Nick Bosa for me. He's somebody that came in at number one and just never moved, but a lot of people moved Quentin Williams above him that year. So, things really do change. There's just so many variables in all this. So I think, yes, it's easy to put him at number one. It's a no-brainer for anyone to take him number one overall. I would be very surprised if he doesn't have a lot of success in the NFL. I think the problem is, as we've learned with quarterbacks over the years, is certain environments don't set up their quarterbacks well. And I think we're waiting to see, how Jacksonville does with Urban Meyer and the staff and that team, and a lot of changes with a lot of draft capital and cap space, and if they do it the right way. But I think Trevor is good enough that even in a mediocre situation, I think he'll have a lot of success.
So this is going kind of off the cuff, and I remember a couple weeks ago you tweeted, maybe this will be an old exposed take tweet, but I really haven't been a fan, and you know what I'm referencing. I haven't been a fan of what Jacksonville has done since the season ended. So who would you have hired if it wouldn't have been Urban? Like, what direction would you have went?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think because, obviously you go out and get Urban, and there's a proven track record of success at the college level there. He's a big name. Creates a lot of hype. I think a lot of people believe in him, being a good offensive guy for the Trevor Lawrence era. And I think that, we have to see how his staff does and all of that. So I think for me, the reason I'm not a fan of it is I don't know if that, number one, if that style will work on the NFL player. I think that's most important. Number two, I think that he's not a guy you can ever, assume is going to be there for the long term. And I think Jacksonville is in a spot where you're starting over, right? Or they had the chance to start over. I think when you look at it, they had the chance to really align Trevor Lawrence, who ownership has had as the number one guy. This goes back to summer, and a new GM and a new head coach all together, and start a new era of probably a lot of success. Now you're looking at it, you have Urban come in there. Obviously with Urban there, you were never going to get a high-profile GM candidate because there's got to be this politics and this control over the roster. And, Trent Baalke there is there's a lot of issues around that, and it's surprising, and we'll see how that goes. But I just think this doesn't seem like a long-term job for Urban. Does anybody think Urban's going to be there for more than 5 years?
I don't. Personally, I don't.
No, a lot of people don't. And if you're saying that, well, do you think Jacksonville will win a Super Bowl in the next 3 years? I don't either. So that's my problem with it. I don't think the vision I don't see the vision. Obviously, they do. To answer your question, which is the most important part, I really like the potential package of Robert Saleh and Ed Dodds. And the reason I say that is, does Saleh have his deficiencies, obviously, on the offensive side of the ball? Yes, those are going to exist. But I think a lot of people are excited for once about the Jets and getting Mike LaFleur. And the Jets already had their GM in place and Joe Douglas, so that was a different kind of build. But Saleh and Dodds would have been a package deal where you're getting top-notch player evaluation from Dodds. You're getting obviously a leader in there in Saleh, who coached there. There's familiarity with the franchise already, and I think that would have led to him wanting to return. And I think that would have excited me. I think Brian Daboll would have made a lot of sense if you were looking for somebody to come in and strictly develop the offense and the quarterback. And I think Daboll is somebody that a lot of good GMs would have been more than happy to work with. So once again, I'm pairing coaches that have pull at the front office spots because one doesn't really work without the other unless you're, Bill Belichick. That's the only that's an outlier example. It's not a good thing to make to compare to anyone else.
Not the standard.
It's not going to be replicated very easily. So I think that's where I stand. I think that they would have been able to get Daboll or Saleh, and they passed. They went name chasing a little bit. Urban might have some early success. We'll see. But I wonder how the drafting will go long term, and I wonder how long he'll be there.
Gotcha. So now to the number 2 pick, and given that you are a Jets fan and have a podcast revolving around the Jets, this question has to be asked. What do they do at 2? Robert Saleh, whether people know this or not, has said everything pretty much the right way regarding to Sam Darnold. But as we know, he can persuade Joe Douglas to take his guy. So who do they take it to? What do they do it to?
Well, obviously we have a couple months of seeing how things play out. But if you were asking me today what I think personally happens, I think that they'll ultimately trade Sam Darnold. I think they will get at least a second rounder in return for him. And I think they will, it'd be crazy if they didn't do this. I think they will stay put at 2 after trading Sam Darnold. And I think they'll draft Zach Wilson. If I was guessing today, I think you look at everybody's been talking for a very long time about Zach Wilson's fit in, Kyle Shanahan's scheme. The Jets will be running pretty much the same exact scheme. Mike LaFleur has been the passing coordinator there for a while now and has had his fingerprints on that offense. So I think when you look at it, trading Darnold and getting that kind of draft capital puts them in a unique positioning where, unlike the Darnold era, you can actually build around Zach Wilson. And maybe it'll be Justin Fields, right? I wouldn't write that off. I think Justin Fields is a phenomenal prospect. I think Trey Lance is a phenomenal prospect. I just look at, and I've thought this for a while, for at least 2 months now, the league is starting to build a consensus that Zach Wilson is the second best guy. And I think that putting that aside, right, because you can make an argument Fields is better. You can make an argument Lance is better. It's a preference of traits. They all check the character boxes. I think all 3 are phenomenal people that will work hard and develop and want to be coached. I think that it's just such a seamless fit in what they want to do on offense. And I think that when you position yourselves that you have an extra first rounder this year, you have an extra first rounder next year, you have an extra 3 and an extra 5 this year, you might have an extra 2 because of Darnold. Maybe you get more. Let's just call it what it is and make the safe assumption, because Josh Rosen brought back a 2 and a 5. Let's not get crazy and say Darnold brings back a 2 and a 4. That means the Jets this year are picking twice in round 1, twice in round 2, twice in round 3, twice in round 4, twice in round 5. That's a lot to work with for a young quarterback. Really? Now, as people are listening to this, they're probably going, why wouldn't you just trade that for Deshaun Watson? I think we're going to run into the problem here that because the Texans are not taking trade calls on Deshaun Watson. The Texans might drag this thing out long enough that you got to make other plans. You can't put all your eggs in the Deshaun Watson basket if he's simply not available. Maybe this goes into summer where Deshaun Watson doesn't show up for training camp,
Right.
and the Texans, everybody's made their quarterback plans already. So, asking me today, I think ultimately that's what makes the most sense right now for the Jets in this draft.
Gotcha. So now in the draft community, and when we do mock drafts, we always preface every pick with, no, this is not what we would do. This is what we think happens. But tossing that aside, what would you do if you were in control of the Jets at 2? Obviously, you know who's not going to be there at 2. But again, you never know. What would you do at 2 if you were the GM of the Jets?
I would take Zach Wilson, and I would do that, right now, that's what I would be making my plans to do. And when you look at it, now, if I ranked the top dream scenarios, Deshaun Watson's number one. I mean, I'm not foolish. Of course, Deshaun Watson's number one, right? Now, when you look at it, though, it's just he doesn't exist right now as a possibility to land him. And I think people need to understand that. And it's okay. But if that door opens, that's the number one option. Number two, though, for me, because you believe in Joe Douglas as a drafter, you believe in the draft capital that you have, you believe in the free agency cap space that you have allocated or potentially there to use, because cash and cap are a little different. But let's assume the Jets can spend big and solve some of their needs before they go into the draft. Right. Zach Wilson, to me, is the second best quarterback in this draft. He's a dream scheme fit for the Jets. I think that he can come in and play right away at a not a super high level, but an adequate starting level with the throws he can make, especially on the move, and the ability to threaten the defense a little bit with his legs. So I think for the Jets, you're looking at it, you got to go get a guy like a Joe Thuney or Corey Linsley in free agency, right. Beef up the interior line. You still want to draft another offensive lineman, and you're going to really look to develop a run-heavy attack. But I think Zach Wilson is what makes the most sense at 2, because you can't play the game of getting cute at quarterback. You need to take whoever you think is the second best, the guy after Trevor. And that's the position, fortunately, that they are in, picking at 2. If they were picking at 3 or 4, it becomes a much more difficult conversation, but they have a little bit more control here at 2.
So that actually segments perfectly into the next question, and that is, do you think the Jets will, spend money and, help a quarterback out rather than kind of the route they went with Darnold, with Quincy Enunwa, Jamison Crowder, and those type of players, when we have such a loaded free agent class with players like Allen Robinson, Juju Smith-Schuster? Juju and Sam Darnold were obviously teammates in college, but we don't think Darnold's going to go back to the Jets. But anyway, any of those guys plus Kenny Golladay, and with a loaded receiver class as we have.
Well, I think it'll be a little different than what they tried with Darnold. I think with Sam, it was a lot of, you signed Le'Veon Bell to a big money deal, and you thought you had the best back in the league, or a top 3 back. You paid Jamison Crowder as the top slot guy in the league. And, Enunwa's career-ending injury was impossible to predict, and I think that threw a big wrench into the Jets' plans, is, having him as your outside target with Crowder and Robbie Anderson. I'm talking Mike McCagnon's attempt to build around Sam, not Joe Douglas. So, Enunwa, Robbie, and Crowder in another world is somewhat serviceable. And what you thought you were getting in Le'Veon, the biggest issue was the offensive line was abysmal, and there was not the correct effort to improve that. Joe Douglas will do the opposite here. It'll be O-line first. We've already seen that. You draft Mekhi Becton, top 15. He looks like a hit. You spend money to get McGovern and Fant and a couple of guards. Now, not all that worked out. I think Fant has been fine at right tackle. I think McGovern was up and down. I think bridge guys like Van Rotten and Alex Lewis are not the answer at guard. So you got a lot of work left to do there. And I think because of that, you'll see an offseason where they go after Joe Thuney. They go after Corey Linsley. You try to really build a stout interior. You're still going to draft a guy maybe as your future right tackle or a guard this year. And I think that's, you build it from the inside out, where you have Crowder. You don't have much at wide receiver after him and Mims, and you don't have much at running back. You really have Pirine coming back and Ty Johnson. But I think they'll attack it where did they come out on day 1 of free agency and offer Allen Robinson $20 million a year? I don't think so. I think they believe internally that Mims can handle that role. I'm not going to sit here and tell you Denzel Mims is Allen Robinson. Right. But internally, they probably think Mims can be enough or close enough to it that they don't have to go give a guy $20 million to do that. So Mims and Crowder, maybe you do sign another receiver, but I don't think that they go out for the 20 million, 15 million Galladay, Godwin, Robinson route. I think they take advantage of a really good draft class and try to go there. So I think the money will be spent on interior offensive line. Maybe you get a veteran running back like a Jamal Williams. And then I think you go into the draft and look for your skill guys. So, and I think that's serviceable to work for a young quarterback. If you keep them upright and you have a run game, you don't have to go pay wide receivers $20 million. And those guys are great and deserve that money. But I think the Jets will take a completely different approach to what they did for Sam.
Previously. So next quarterback, where do you think Trey Lance is right now? Like his draft value? Because it seems all over the place. You know, there's some that I wouldn't say necessarily mock to the Jets because that's more Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, but then you'll see him 4 to the Falcons with the thought that Matt Ryan will, mentor him for a year. And then you'll see him sometimes maybe go 10, 12, where is his value right now as we speak? And obviously the last 2 months of the process can make or break.
Yeah, it can. Now, I'll say this for Trey. I think when teams see him work out, it'll trend upwards for them. It won't trend the other way. So I think that's exciting for him. He's going to wow teams with his arm. He's going to wow teams with his character, and he can move. He's a really good athlete, and he's built. He's a guy that has a sturdy frame. So they're not going to trend downwards. And I think for Trey, I've been saying he's a top 8 pick all along. And you look at Carolina's been aggressive early. They made a real play for Stafford. We'll see if they can get anyone that they like. We'll see if they go after a Darnold. We'll see if they, trade up for a Justin Fields. But I don't see Trey Lance falling out of the top 10. There's too much talent. There's too much quarterback need. Washington wants a quarterback. They'd move up to go get one. Carolina. Miami and Atlanta, I don't think will be super aggressive to get quarterbacks, but I think that means they'll trade their pick. So you have the 49ers.
I was saying, you think San Francisco trades up for Kyle to finally get his guy?
And Trey is looked at as a guy that people would like to sit for at least half a year. So maybe you roll into the season with Jimmy and let Trey develop behind him, and then you roll with Trey Lance as your 2022 guy. So when you look at it like that, I just don't see a scenario where this guy falls really far down the board. I think, quite frankly, we'll have 4 quarterbacks go in the top 8 picks. I feel pretty comfortable about 4 quarterbacks going in the top 10.
What about Mac? Where's Mac fall? Could he be 15 to New England, or is he falling out of the first round?
I have him outside of round 1 now. If a New Orleans takes him or a team trades back into round 1 to secure him, it wouldn't shock me. I look at Mac Jones, and he's not a typical round 1 quarterback because he doesn't have the athleticism that a lot of these guys have, but a ton of arm talent. A lot of Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff kind of play. And I think when you look at it like that, do you use a first-round pick on that guy? Well, some teams believe you do. I don't believe it. So can he sneak into the end of round 1? Absolutely. Will he? I would say it's more 40-60 right now, with the 60% being that he doesn't.
What if he does sneak into the round 1, what is he getting the same draft grade as Daniel Jones did on draft?
No, I mean, no. I like him a lot better than Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones was he was in my top 70 barely, and Mac will be a round 2 player firmly. You could see with Jones is a lot of risk, and we've seen that the turnovers are terrible and the injuries are a problem, but there was also a lot of athletic upside, and we've seen that with some crazy runs and throws on the move. Now with Mac, if you put Mac in like New Orleans, where you have maybe the best offensive line in the NFL, Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, Sean Payton, I think Mac will be fine. Now, do I think Mac will ever be, extending and creating on his own like Watson or Russ or Rodgers or all these guys that go far in the postseason? I just don't think that's his game. So do you have the infrastructure in place where he can succeed? Not a lot of teams, and I mean succeed at a very high level, not just being the middle of the pack guy. Right. Not a lot of teams do, but maybe one of the 3 teams that like a New Orleans, they think it's worth it and they take them.
Gotcha. So from the quarterbacks, we go to a polarizing player, depending who you ask. I wouldn't mind if my Vikings took him at 14, and that is edge Gregory Rousseau. What's the best case scenario for him, and what's the worst case scenario for him? Could Vikings realistically scoop him at 14 and pair him next to a player we both love, Daniil Hunter, for the next 5 to 7 years?
They absolutely could. There's no reason why he's not there at 14. I think with Rousseau, the 1-year wonder label, which scares teams. Where does he play, right? He lines up at every alignment on that Miami film. Some of his best pass rush reps are from the interior, which is very interesting for a guy that's kind of built like Carlos Dunlap, right? 6'6", 245, really long, lean. Now, I think he comes in heavier when we get to see him work out. So maybe he'll be more of the, Eric Armstead kind of player, a little bit more filled out. So I think he's there at 14. I think he's going to be an interesting case study for a lot of teams. You could see, everything I've heard is that he is a very hardworking guy. And when you take these 1-year wonder players, that's the first thing you check on. Does he want to get better? Does he want to continue to work? And he will, which makes you feel better. Is he very explosive? I don't see that. I see him win with length. I see him win, by being a little bit more savvy on the interior than just outright constantly converting speed to power or beating a guy off the ball. It's off the snap. So those are the things that you wonder, will he get better for such a young player? He might. Where do you want to play him? Do you want to play him as a 5-tech? Do you want to play him on the inside? Well, maybe he can do a little bit of both. So I think Rousseau for me is more in that, end of round 1 range. But when a guy has that kind of production and that kind of traits with that length and build, there's no reason why it wouldn't surprise anyone if he goes in the top 20.
Gotcha. Remember a couple years ago, 2018, when Davenport went to the Saints, like based on the same thing, and
yes,
been mixed results. But
and when you look at Rousseau, it's a great example, right? Davenport had a big Senior Bowl. He was somebody that played against poor level of competition.
Right.
And Rousseau played at Miami and had 15 plus sacks and, destroyed a terrible Florida State offensive line, but he had some games against good teams. And you just, you're right. It's teams will value that kind of length and pass rush ability that they can get out of you. It's like quarterbacks. They just go a little higher than you always project them.
So actually going back to quarterbacks, this isn't criticizing you specifically because everyone underestimated Justin Herbert last year, but do you think his success changes how quarterbacks are evaluated? And do you think anything in terms of the process of scouting, or is that as of now just a 1-year outlier, just one, and that's it?
So it's a great question, because here's my thought on it. I don't think he changes anything because I don't think the league's changed. I think we've changed as evaluators, right? We evaluate players because we have such a sample size of failure where if a guy is inaccurate and struggles under pressure, he will probably be the same guy at the next level. Herbert is a complete outlier. And Herbert was very good as an underclassman, and I thought should have declared, and I thought would have been a top 10 pick that year. I thought he would declare. Things fell apart his senior year, and he got back to being the guy we thought he could be. Now, the Chargers look like geniuses, and I look like an idiot. And a lot of people.
Not the only one.
And that's okay. But the Giants had sold themselves on the same thing with Daniel Jones, and it looks really bad. And the Eagles at another time did the same thing with Carson Wentz. And Wentz had a really big year. But the overall sample size of Wentz, people need to realize, is bad.
Right.
It is. It's not good. And so you have to wonder who's right. And at the end of the day, it's somewhere in the middle. Teams will overdraft traits and hope that – and we're going to find out about this with Jordan Love. Jordan Love was somebody – Jordan Love's a little different because he didn't go top 10. But Jordan Love is drafting traits. That's what it is. You're not. It's not Joe Burrow. You saw him win a national championship, and he's
play 7
point accurate. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So you know what? Honestly, this is going to be how the league is for a very long time. I think. It's interesting. It's not really like that this year because I just haven't seen that guy that teams are gonna overdraft him. I just haven't seen him. I think. The top 4, Lance, Fields, Lawrence, and Wilson, are justifiably top 10 picks. And There's totally reasons why. Mac Jones, as much as I'm not a first round fan, I get it. But this is a weird year where it all makes sense. Usually, though, you look at Josh Allen. I had Josh Allen in the top of the second round. He went top 10. I thought that was very early, and he's a star now. But it took a couple of years. It really did.
Yeah.
And Paxton Lynch went in the first round. He had no business going in the first round.
People forget about him. That's kind of just slipped under the rug of how big of a just draft bust he was all time.
People do forget. And he couldn't even hang in the league as a backup. So it's a great question because no answer exists. There are going to be guys that are giant misses because the gamble didn't work, and there will be guys that are hits because they were developed. And quite frankly, they had it in them to develop.
Gotcha. So this is the last question before we let you go. Again, we appreciate you being on, but can you give us a bold prediction of something that happens in the first round? Whether New England trades up to get their guy, San Francisco goes up to get their guy, no trades at all in the first round, which don't think it's going to happen, but it's a bold prediction for a reason.
Ooh, I will say Washington does something crazy. And what I mean by that is they'll either trade a lot for Sam Darnold or they'll go up to get a guy. And I say that because, they got Heineke back on a 2-year deal and they feel good. And he's on backup money. He's making like $8 million over 2 years, like $4.5 million a year. Right. That's a cheap backup. They know that they have the defense to win the division again, but more importantly, actually win playoff games. And the clock is ticking to get a quarterback in there that can be the future of their franchise. So Washington will either make a big trade for a guy like Sam Darnold, or they'll move up. But you can't sit at 19. You can't. Right. They know they have to jump San Francisco. They probably have to jump Carolina. Does somebody call Miami or Atlanta? Or maybe the Jets. I don't think so, but Miami or Atlanta, probably. So I'll go with Washington as my splashy offseason team at quarterback.
Gotcha. Well, we appreciate the interview, Connor. If anybody enjoyed it, please let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, at Connor J. Rogers on Twitter, doing the Patreon Badlands, covers everything the NFL draft and New York Jets. At Bleacher Report, me and Adam Lefko are launching a draft show pretty soon. We're very excited about it, and we cover all 3 days of the NFL draft live. So if this is your cup of tea, you could join us for all of March, all of April, and pretty much all year round.
And then draft night.
That's right.
Yeah, well, we appreciate it, Connor. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for having me.